The family component's not there yet, but and as we grow, especially as we start our substance use specific tracks, um, I intend to ensure that we have the APG model and that continuum built in as we go along. So,
Awesome. Awesome. Larissa, is that you?
That is me, sir. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
I want to let you know, in the spirit of full disclosure, that I am currently standing in the Old Navy. My teenager is having a fashion emergency. That is why I'm not on camera, but it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you all so much. I will just do a really quick explanation of the circuitous route I took to arrive here. I started out my professional life as an engineer and did not love the idea that I wasn't making the world a better place. And so I left and went and got a couple master's degrees in education and spent 19 glorious years in the classroom, at which point I sold out to corporate America and began working in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space for Fidelity Investments. And the Lord put on my heart that that was not going to be where I was going to stay anymore. And so now I've given up my cush life and have taken over the executive directorship of Divine Trust Ministries, which is based on a book written by our founder that John, I believe you've read, who struggled mightily with addiction. And we have identified a gap. And I heard Tim talking about the gap. And as an educator and a mother of a ton of kids, that really matters to me. And so when John recommended that we watch Generation Found, we just looked at each other, the founder and I, and said, here it is, Eureka, this is it. This is the direction for our ministry. So again, in the spirit of full disclosure, I know nothing. I've never done this. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have imposter syndrome. I make it up as I go. And I have nothing to contribute except for the fact that I do have a lot of experience with marketing and branding for social media. Other than that, I'm just a hot mess, y'all, but I'm glad to be here with you.
Isn't that weird, guys? You're talking about, whatever the designer God, whatever you want to call it, of all times for Larissa to show up. It's now when we're really starting to look at some of these mediums, etc. Just thank you. I'm glad you're here. I really am. And don't hesitate to jump in, anybody. All right. Let me tell you what I wrote down here as I was getting ready for this. Anything and everything we do, and you could hear it in the voices, and you could hear it in the example I was giving you about anything that is done in alternative peer group programs, if it's not underlined with enthusiastic recovery, it doesn't work. You say that again. If you aren't enthusiastic, and if you can't pass that on to the people in the program, that enthusiasm, it is not going to work. So, as you apply that to the different mediums of social media, or technology might be a better word in this case, because it's not all social media. There's other things and it kind of gives a gray line to me. What's the difference between, for example, Facebook and just having a web page, and where does one start to have, and I mean on the effect side, where does one, what are the differences here? How do we make use of those to reach the most people out there? Interesting startup thought. Larissa just said that as they were approaching their goals, they ran across, the movie, looked at it and went, this fills the gap. And Tim mentioned the gap, those kinds of things. Alternative peer group programs have been around for 50 years. They have touched every part of this country at one point or another in that 50 years. Most people, as they come into this field, are very aware of residential programs. Now they are very aware of MAT. Why, after 50 years, are they not more aware of 18 months to 4 years, case managed, include peers, include family, continuity of care? Why are they not? Why is it new? Why is that a new thing where these other things are not? And I mean that as a real question for us to start this off. It's frustrating, but there's an answer for it, I believe. What do you guys think it is?
John, may I put on my obnoxious marketing corporate
Please
hat
do.
for a
Please
second?
do. Please, I want you to.
So the simple answer to your very good question is this. Anytime there is a lack of acknowledgement, understanding, or familiarity, it comes down to a failure, and I hate using that word, an opportunity to do a much better job with branding and marketing.
Okay.
And awareness. Like, I mean, an awareness campaign would be, in my feeble brain, probably a great step.
Awareness campaign. I've never in 50 years heard that phrase used around alternative peer group. That's exactly why we're doing this today.
Okay.
We are absolutely wanting to blaze a trail that has never been done.
So
and
with an awareness,
here.
Okay.
A little bit more to add into this as we're trying to answer this question of how are we going to do this? It's not that it hasn't been made public knowledge. In 1979, 70, or 80, although there was not a term APG, the original APG was on the cover of People magazine. It went on every major television show known. It was on what at the time was a big deal, Johnny Carson. Carol Burnett's daughter came in the program. Several rock and roll personalities came in the program. In 1980, 81, the First Lady, Nancy Reagan, spoke at the gala. Now that's a lot of stuff, a lot of people talking about. I'll tell you one of the things that was a problem in answering my own question of why did the mileage not attend the notoriety at the time. My belief is that, you remember I said at that time it wasn't called, there was no term alternative peer group. It was just a program, all right? And a program is different than an approach. I know that there have been lots of residential programs, the Meadows, you know, gosh, y'all don't know this, but there are things like HIH and all sorts of different residential programs that have become known at one time and then not known, you know, and some of them are still known. I'm just saying though that naming the program is not the same as naming the approach. And it might be that maybe that we've named the approach, alternative peer groups. It might be something that will work. But this awareness campaign. You were going to say something else, Rissa.
Yes, and I sure don't want to monopolize this conversation because I am honestly the person here with the least to contribute. But I will tell you that awareness campaigns are most successful when they are simultaneously from the bottom up and the top down. And so what that looks like is a grassroots campaign from anyone who's ever been touched by an APG. You know, hashtag APG, is that a thing? Hashtag alternative peer group, whatever the case may be. And so the folks who have had some involvement and that the APG has touched them in some way would come together and start to build awareness from the bottom up. And then there's the top-down approach where all of the sober schools and the affiliated hospitals and, you know, AA, NA, whatever the case may be, would start to illuminate APGs, speak to the metrics. This is, you know, we're seeing 75 to 85% vice the 17%, and I probably have those numbers all wrong. And in today's world, in social media world, really the hashtag is the fastest way to get that done.
And on the top down side of things, you're talking about like hospitals or residential programs, those kinds of things that take advantage of the extending their care. Like here in Houston, we have an organization called the Park Prevention and Recovery Center, and they really, really dig into, at least more than others, this APG thing. On the adolescent program, they'll have actually directors of APG programs come in and talk with their clients while they're in residential, and the families while they're in residential, to try and get them hooked into that, so that as they come out of the park, they go on into the APGs and move on. So you're talking about those groups like that somehow taking part in distributing information in the public eye also. Is that correct?
Yes, and there are different kinds of posts for social media that I would recommend. One of them is called a lifestyle post, and that's something that's sort of personal. It doesn't feel canned. It's a very vulnerable, raw, real experience that someone will share about, here's how an APG changed my life and got me back on track, and I'd probably be dead without it, what have you. And then there would be other ones where everybody's sort of sharing more canned information, such as, hey, in 1988, we were featured in People magazine, and we are still here. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And what did you call that? It's not personal, but what would that be called?
Oh, so well, a lifestyle post is the more raw, real, vulnerable one. I don't know that I would have a name. Does anyone else know what you would call sort of a, it's like a mass education post.
Okay.
And so one person would be responsible for penning that and articulating that and finding the images that should accompany it, and then sending it out to the group of people who are part of the awareness campaign so that they can blast it out on all of their social media channels.
Okay, great. Let me ask you this. What about, have any of y'all ever done any podcasts? Lloyd, you want to share with us a little bit of what you've done? And
mostly as a guest coming on. So that's something that part of what Larissa has been talking about. I think that's the name. Sorry for not knowing, but part of that is having podcasts can be part of a plan, right? Depending on whether you're a one-person shop or whether you're a community of several homes or groups that you're supporting, having that top-down, bottom-up approach that Larissa was talking about is very important. And it's also important to have the buy-in from the people that you're going for. So if you would go to a podcast, having a target of saying, who is listening to this podcast and what do I want out of them, right? So looking at your target, how can they help me? So the podcasts that I've been on in the past have been primarily around disaster management and emergency management. Those have specific people that are listening to those things, and getting on and talking about your program is helpful. Also, to remember though, that people that are in those spaces already, you're talking into a vacuum. You're talking into a place where people already know what you're about. What Larissa was getting at before is when we're getting our medical providers and the other providers that can help APGs push that information out, they oftentimes will have budget. They oftentimes will have a staff or a team of people that can produce content, because these, like for example, I'm a party of one with Hershey here on the Seacoast. Video, stuff like that, that has a dollar factor to it if we aren't producing it ourselves. So what I try to encourage clients about is taking a look at what I want to get out of this. And one of the things that I try to get, trying to work with Seacoast Outright on, is getting the medical centers, getting the people that service these groups of people to get some skin in the game and say, hey, look, this is a program that is for us, it's for kids or youth. And this is how it's presenting in our community. And this is how people are benefiting from you supporting this. So it might not be something that is for all the general population. It might be to your Facebook group. It might be to your Twitter or Instagram group. Once we get into those areas, though, it's knowing the audience. Will photographs with text explanation underneath be enough to drive someone to action? You know, a lot of times before anybody goes to action, they have to have some kind of touch point 7 times or so. So they need to hear it over and over and over again. And that's where those partnerships, that top-down approach Larissa was talking about, the community partnerships have got to be in there to help amplify your voice and hopefully spend some money behind it out of their budget, hopefully, so that we're not putting posts up that people aren't seeing because there's no ad buy behind it, which is what's becoming more and more problematic.
Should I put on my marketing hat?
Yes, please. Slap that baby on.
Well, and I'm retired, of course, but my background included director of marketing for the Kroger Company, which is a large food chain for various, and I'm familiar with different aspects of this. So let's jump that bridge, and God put us on this path so that he uses all of our past experiences for this new and greater cause. Okay. And as I'm sitting here looking at this, now realigning my thinking with the talents and gifts that God gave me to be successful and retire after 25 years, having been an alcoholic and a junkie. Okay. Now let's just lay it down to the reality of part of what I'd mentioned earlier was when I retired, I was giving back and doing volunteer work, going to a fine institution. Matter of fact, the park you mentioned was part of their aftercare program, was a facilitator there, was if you judge it by whose groups made it through the full year of aftercare, the groups that I was a facilitator at accounted for the lion's share of the people who made it. Now, why? But then is it called? Now, let's put it this way. I didn't know that was an APG. No one told me that was an APG.
Yeah, no.
The nomenclature is not there. Okay. When you start looking under that umbrella of what an APG is, I don't think it would be defined by the counselors there as part of their continuum of care. The term APG will not come up. Okay. The term, AA will come up. That's an APG, right? Al-Anon will come up. Could it be? So us define, we have to define what this is. Now, if we define it by our definition, I think we need to pull the power back into what an APG is. It's not an also ran. It's a part of the success profile. That is the 18 months to the 4 years. No one knows that. I think if you had asked LCDCs that are trying to get a job, they will not recognize what we are, the language that we are talking right now, let alone go to the organizations. You're mentioning top down, okay? They don't speak our language right now, okay? They don't. So we have to brand what an APG is. Aftercare is a name that you can cling to, but it lasts for a year. But that's only a piece, and it does nothing to define what I understand the problem is 18 to 4 years. I've lived it. I live it. I do it. And no one, it's a vacuum. That message, however we root it, however I think the big thing that's missing is awareness of what that simple term is. Is it 18 to 4 years? Can anyone give a definition what that looks like in the timeline? I've studied it. I work it here. I prepare people here. That's what I'm doing. I'm doing it organically because I've lived it and I know what those things look like. I prepare for the first Thanksgiving back home and what it should look like. I prepare for the first time. Okay, but getting off course. I think the top-down approach, I think it has to do with how we call this. Is it an APG? Because that's easy to package up and put on the shelf that we don't know about. We don't know what that definition is. Okay? We don't know. People in this business don't know. I started with my own white paper is how I described it, because I knew it didn't work and it wasn't adjusting to what the needs were of the people to keep them safe. Okay? I talk about funding. My full retirement is invested in that belief right now. That's how this place exists. Okay, I went to a meeting, saw John there a few years ago, and a few people that helped, that there was someone out there that thought along the same lines, not even knowing fully and deeply why and how. And there's other people out there, even the people that are like Bill, when he comes with an APG, and they don't know. If I called it an APG, they wouldn't come because they don't know what it is.
Right.
If I call a family meeting, because my belief my firm belief is that even if there isn't a reconciliation, an immediate reconciliation, that program, the family side has to grow back and find a new healing spot to go forward. Now, that's in 18 months to 4 years. And I think that scares people. If, like when I had someone and they told me that, okay, you're going to go to rehab, when are you going to be back to work? 14 days, 30 days, you'll be fixed. If you told an employer that, hey, this is an 18-month to 4-year deal, politicians are scared off. If you were any treatment facility, if you were any treatment, and this comes into marketing, if you were any treatment facility that's competing for business, and someone calls you on the phone and they ask about, okay, how can you fix my daughter or spouse, and you say, okay, it's going to be 4 days in detox, it's going to be 14 days in residential, and then it's going to be a 30-day or 14-day or 21-day PHP. Oh, and they're already just freaking out. So this is going to take months. Now, so they dumb that down. Okay, they dumb that down because they're not going to get that business, because you guys must not be as good as the other guy that said it's over in 30 days and I got to be back to work. And so it's almost reverse, negative, counterproductive marketing that the people that I've been around, it looks like from my marketing chair. And I'm not trying to condemn anyone. I'm not. There's a lot of great people out there that are trying to do the best. But it comes down to dollars and cents. If you're saying that it's going to take 30 days, 60 days, and a year commitment to aftercare, you're going to lose people because they don't have the education. They don't know it's 18 to 4 years. And if you do spout that, you just lose a bunch of business, because the other marketing people will say, no, we'll have you in and out. You'll be back on your way and go to a couple of AA meetings.
Let me, if I can, take what you just said and go back, because what we've shifted to right now is talking about approaching some of the guys, the residential programs, the bigger treatment elements, about including this thing. And there's two things that come out of that. And this is something I know from the inside also on the economics. On the one hand, if we were to, let's take the park for an example, okay? Just to pick one.
A great example.
Yeah, it is. It's compassionate. It's a fairly knowledgeable organization. It's been around APGs ever since it's been in existence. It actually uses them in its adolescent approach, but it does not use it in its adult approach, despite the fact that there have been adult APGs here for a very long time. And it's a great case study for us in this. The part on the business side of things, and we'll probably be doing this several sessions, by the way, because we're picking things apart, the problems, and trying to solve and put together something we've never put together before. I can tell you, this has never been done before, what we're doing right now. The park has interest, despite there being nonprofit, they still want people to come and business, and there's economic interest in it. One of the elements to this disease is program hopping. Because we don't do 18 months to 4 years, what happens is they go into the park, they come out, they take part in some of the aftercare meetings, all right? The aftercare meetings are an element of an APG, but they're not all of an APG. They don't include, because you have to have the family meetings and everything else, you have to define some stuff. And I don't want to get down that too far, but just what'll happen is they still are losing when a relapse point comes along for that client. It is not unusual for that client to have strayed from that aftercare group far enough that when they relapse, it goes on for several months before the family or whatever interventive element is there to get them to return to treatment, or they get busted. They go several months, they're using. When they do get, quote, found out, and are put pressure on to return to treatment, everybody buys into, well, we tried the park, it didn't work, and now they go over to another place, okay? And the clients lose big time by doing that, by the way, because all continuity of care breaks. The new therapists don't know the games. You don't have to own that you didn't follow through with the discharge, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you know who else loses out? The park. The park loses out because that client doesn't come back to them. And so they lose that continuing income that actually it's best for the client and it's best for the park. Mm-hmm. So one thing I want to put into our notes that we're building here, because that's what we're doing. We're kind of building a game plan, one thing to put into the notes. Let's say that in Seattle, there's a residential program that is acted like they're friendly to what you're doing. Okay. And what you do is you go and you visit with them. And one of the things you want to carry with you if you make that visit is, if we have one of your clients, somebody who went through residential, it's a part of our approach to avoid program hopping. So if there's a relapse, y'all get ready, because they're coming back to you. If we're case managing this, they're going to come back to you. We want them to. And it'll be something that's a positive statement as you're trying to enlist this some of these top-down friends to this process. Does that make sense, guys? And don't hesitate to say, Kate, you're an idiot. Well, say it nicer than that, but.
No, that's exactly what's been done before. Like you, Tim, I was at the park at least on a monthly basis for about a year, doing the family program and teaching them what an APG is. Nobody has a clue. You always have to teach them, what does that actually mean? But something I was thinking about when you were talking, Tim, was why isn't this being taught in the curriculum for LCDCs or at the community colleges? It ought to be part of those books, like as a method or a movement of sorts, but not just a movement. It's a bona fide method of treating people. I really think we should look at that too, and maybe start locally, like at San Jack, and Lone Star, locally to Houston, where this is maybe been around their ears a little bit.
That's a great idea, and that's another top-down group.
Advocacy is going to be a big part of this, because the guidelines of care, and you guys are much more familiar than I am, but it appears the lines are drawn by the insurance companies and what's mandated by each state as what the acceptable amount of care is. And that's determined by what insurance then will pay. And so when they meet those minimums, that's where insurance companies stop. And so it goes out to private funding or private or state funding. And so that's where the gap is. I think it goes back to addressing this issue, not as to build another hospital or a treatment facility or more of those. I think it's expanding and supporting in guidelines in recognition that this is an 18-month deal to 4-year deal. And there should be legislative support and conversation. That's what's going to truly then get leverage to getting it paid for with some groups. And then at that point, you're golden because you know that you've made that hurdle. And I don't know in the circle of things how to get there, but right now that's a major issue because they don't teach this in school. And the families that I'm dealing with, they didn't put aside, okay, they have a 529 for education, for their kids, but they don't have a 528 in case or whatever, or a health savings account set aside that has a piece cut out that you could actually pull that, and it's even if it's just tax deferred, pull that money and pay for an APG or pay for additional. So that's gears and pulleys, high ultra space level. That's where we need to get the conversation, a clear conversation, a non-compromise conversation too.
Guys, this has been awesome. It's just a mind bender, frankly. We're at the end of our time. We're going to do this again next week. We're going to follow up. I'm going to ask everybody to please spend a little time writing down some ideas. I just wrote down advocacy committee. I just wrote down PR or marketing committee, but those are just the committees. What do you do? What do you do? And we've been here for an hour and it's been awesome and wonderful. We still need to also approach, okay, so how does all the strategy that we've been talking about, because that's mostly strategy we've been talking about, how does that sift down to tactics? All right. What do we do with Facebook? What do we do with Twitter? What do we do with, all of those kind of things? Again, Larissa, Tim, you guys are, what timing? Hello, God. That's all I'm going to say. I'm just going to say hello, God. Thank you guys
John,
so much.
May I just say really quickly, Tim, I sent you in chat my email address. I would love for us to be able to connect offline, if that's okay.
No, that's fine.
Oh, you don't want to
That's
talk
fine.
to Tim.
I don't know. I'm not real good on Zoom, but I'll see if I can find that. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
I love you guys. I'll see you next week. Stay dry, stay cool, stay warm, whatever fits your place wherever you are around the country. I love you guys. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Thank you.